I think every parent can relate to this. Dinner time. We want a very organized structure, or even getting ready in the morning. These are times of like chaos. The rest of it, I can let my kids play. They play peacefully. I can solve arguments between my children very easily, but I cannot make my child pick up his spoon and put it in his mouth. And I don't really want to, but I do want to see him eat. I don't know, maybe I'm getting away from the philosophical parenting.
No, this is
topic.
bang on. That's exactly right. Yeah, this is a great topic.
So, these are choices that he has to make. Now, I've seen a lot of parents, including myself sometimes, I tell them to eat their meal and then they'll be rewarded with dessert. And this is like, okay, I want them to make the choice on their own, but ultimately I want them to do what I want them to do. Ultimately I want them to be fed healthy food rather than just candy and snacks and desserts, because that's easy to get in kids. It's very difficult. I'm a very healthy eater, so I want to see my child eat a healthy diet. But nature has made us in such a way that we prefer sweets over vegetables. Nature. But so this is a solution. I mean, and I want to approach this philosophically, like almost negotiate with my child. But it's a lot of times I end up frustrated, and that's probably the term I think most parents can come away with is dinner times and mornings when there's a schedule to keep or there's nutrition to feed your child. Those are when this philosophical parenting becomes very challenging and frustrating to me as a parent.
Right. Well, I'll give you sort of the solution that I've come up with to the vegetables versus the candy, right? And so the first thing, this started, I guess, when my daughter was about two and a bit, to draw cartoons and help her to understand a little bit about how her body works. And we have two characters in her body. One is called the tongue and one is called the belly or the butt. And the tongue wants all this sugar because the tongue gets really happy with sugar, but the belly doesn't like the sugar. And the bum doesn't like the sugar because it turns the poo into little bricks. And so kids really they gain their understanding through stories and through metaphors. They're not obviously at the empirical science stage. They can't do math, but they can understand all of this kind of stuff, right? So my daughter was really frustrated when she'd have a cold. My nose was running and all of that, and we sort of explained that the antibodies are having a big fight and they're trying to throw all of the bugs that are giving you the cold, and I throw them and then it'll make you sneeze into the boogers and so on. So to get her to understand what's happening to her really helps. And so we have when we do these role plays, like these characters, the tongue and the belly. What does the tongue want? Sugar, sugar, sugar. Well, what does the belly want? Vegetables, vegetables. Ooh, they're really lovely. And so we have this kind of joke thing where we understand why, right? So and sugar is not bad. We all need a little bit of sugar during the day and so on. And what happens to her teeth? And we do little bugs on the teeth, and they sort of bite the enamel if they're biting the sugar and stuff like that. So I find that the understanding is the key. And if I've taken the time to really work, not in the moment, I don't think you can ever solve a conflict in the moment. To me, the conflicts always occur with a lack of preparation.
I agree.
So yes, you spend a lot of time explaining why the vegetables are important, why the sugar is not good for you. And, my daughter is currently going through a complete fascination with every disease known to mankind. She wants to know all about them. So, of course, one of the key ones we've introduced is diabetes. What happens if you have too much sugar and blah, blah, blah. Get an injection every day. And so we make sure that her little stuffed animals don't have diabetes, or we give them injections. So should we understand that, right? And so, if I'm eating half a cookie or whatever, she's, Daddy, don't finish that. We don't want you to get diabetes, whatever, right? I mean,
yeah.
So to give her a solid understanding of what's going on in her body and why her tongue wants, I explained to her, a long time ago, sugar was really hard to find. So we had to really go look for it. And the way we did that was through taste. Vegetables were everywhere. Now it's the other way around and so on, right? So for me, it's all about the explanation and the preparation. And I've been doing these conversations with Dana Martin and Lorette Lynn, really around even more voluntary styles of parenting, where I will let her have as much as she wants of some particular treat. And I found that, we were doing some speech in the States. We stayed at a hotel where they had Fruit Loops, the little cool boxes. I loved those as a kid too, like the mini boxes of cereal. So she loved Fruit Loops, and then for like 6 months it was like she wanted Fruit Loops, and then we'd have to sort of I'd try and manage that and control that and so on. And then I just gritted my teeth and let her have all the Fruit Loops she wanted, and she's never asked for them since. It's just kind of weird that way. If you get to satiation, then it's less problematic. But for me, if she says, I want candy, I say, well, is that your belly talking, or is that Mr. Tongue talking? Is Mr. Tongue talking? Well, what does your belly say? Oh, I don't know, maybe more vegetables. So at least get her to understand that there's at least some duality between her taste buds and her digestive system, and that she can't just listen to one and at the expense of the other. And that has really, I think, helped in terms of, doesn't mean that everything is conflict free, but it does mean that there's a narrative or a framework to appeal to when she's trying to make nutrition decisions.
Yeah, I've had similar success. I haven't used the stories like you had, and I think that's excellent, where you've got, Mr. Belly and Mr. Tongue, but I've, made it very clear to my daughter, the health reasons that we eat healthy foods. It's okay to have some foods that aren't healthy as long as we don't have a lot of them. And she gets it, so she, in our house, we say, well, it's okay if you have one dessert a day, as long as if you're eating healthy foods the rest of the time, one dessert a day is fine. And, I pretty much within that, range of foods, you can have pretty much whatever you want. And we just keep healthy food around the house. Outside of, we'll have some desserts. She can pretty much pick what she wants, and she's getting healthy food because we just keep healthy food around. And she can pick out her dessert when she wants it. And if she wants to have that, or early in the day, then she knows she's not going to have any more dessert the rest of the day. And it's, like Stefan said, does it eliminate all conflict? No, but it eliminates pretty much all of it. I mean, she really understands, and she'll even again, she'll watch me and be like, oh, if you have that cookie, Dad, you're not going to be able to have anything tonight. And, and then the other thing,
God help us. We put the rule in, which was no talking with your mouth full, and now at least 80 times a day.
Right.
Daddy,
right.
You're talking with me anyway, but oops.
Yeah. And
Sorry,
just one more thing I was going to say is, Steve, you were talking about how, you sit down at the dinner table and you want the child to eat. You want to see them eat. For my philosophy with that has always just been, if you're not hungry, that's fine. You don't have to eat now. Your mother and I, we're going to eat now, and we would love it if you would stay with us because we enjoy your company. But if you don't want to, and your food, we're not going to make food for you again. So, if you want the food we prepare, if you want warm food, now's the time to eat it. Later on, you're just going to get whatever you can get yourself. My daughter's 7, so she can go get a banana, she can go get yogurt, whatever. She doesn't quite know how to work all the warming things up in the microwave, but so she understands that, okay, her options are limited later. And it's really not been a problem. Sometimes she'll just have a few bites and go away and then get something herself later. And that's fine because it's not more work for me because she knows at that point it's her responsibility. So, but most of the time, because she's very social, she's, me and her are, her mother and I are her best friends and vice versa. She loves to be with us. And so when we say, oh, well, we'd like you to stay and socialize with us, she'll stay. And then usually we'll just, while I'm here, I might as well eat. So that's just kind of how we've solved it.
Yeah. My question to you, Stefan, is, how do you feel about that sort of liberty to come and go to the kitchen table, rather than just having you'll sit here, you'll stay here till all of us are done, and nobody leaves, nobody looks around, nobody messes. No, I don't want to hear any noises. I don't, I mean, how do you feel about this sort of like the liberty it's your choice to come to the table, eat with us when the meal's hot, but your choice is later on you can enjoy the same meal. I'm not going to cook something different. But how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, just imagine yourself in that situation, right? So you go to a restaurant and the maitre d' says, okay, I will be happy to seat you and I would be happy to bring you food, but you got to choose from these 3 items on the menu and you have to finish your whole plate. And by the way, I'm going to schedule you when you're going to come and eat. If you don't finish your plate, you have to damn well sit there until you finish your plate, and I want a nice tip at the end of it. We would be shocked at a restaurant that would operate in that manner, and it would go out of business in about 12 seconds. So the restaurant, of course, works in that you go when you're hungry and you order, and if you don't want to finish, you can take it home or they can toss it out or whatever. So I think that we want to introduce the maximum conceivable liberty to our children. For me, there's my wife, myself, my daughter, but there's this other thing called the image of a family. What is a family? What does a family do? What is good parenting? That these are the images that are in my head, and they're like a fourth party.
Yeah.
They're like the unwanted fairy at the table, which is that a family should sit down and eat and talk together all at the same time, and so on. But it's more stable for me. My weight is stable, and I've had 46 years to get used to how to eat or whatever. My daughter's growing. She goes through these phases where she's incredibly hungry all the time. It's like back up a grocery truck down a well. You just throw stuff down. She keeps eating. There are other times where she's not that hungry. Her meal times change during the day. I mean, she's going through massive growth at the moment. And so I don't feel like I can impose the stability of an adult rhythm of consumption and elimination on somebody whose biological schedule is constantly changing with growth spurts and then the sort of lags and so on. So, I mean, she likes it enough that she'll come and sit with us. And I know how satisfying it is. When your child has had a good meal, don't you just feel like a great parent, especially if they've eaten really good stuff? And I want to make sure, of course, it's not about my emotional needs, but rather about what's useful to her. And so if we make meal times as enjoyable and as sort of fun, chatty as possible, and try not to give her snacks before meals and so on. But yeah, if she's not hungry, I can't see making her sit down and eat and finish her meal. I mean, that would be, if I wouldn't accept that at a restaurant, I don't know why I want to impose that at home.
Right. One of the things I've found about parenting is the best, for lack of a better word, the best tactics, the best strategies are for good parenting are ones that work well with anyone. If it works well with your coworker, if it works well with your wife, that would work well with with your child. So it's again, you would never go to a restaurant that did the things that Stefan said. You would never, if you're your wife would never accept that kind of treatment from you. So why would you do it to your child? An interesting point you brought up, Stephen, with the wanting it to be quiet at the table, or wanting there's different things that are considered like good manners.
Yeah. Order.
Which are kind of their cultural things, which they're not. There's nothing immoral about it. Chewing with your mouth open. It's not an immoral action, but it is something that, be it just cultural bias or not, it's something we don't prefer. We don't prefer to be around people that are chewing with their mouth open. Maybe if we were from a different culture, we wouldn't care. But so what I do with my daughter is I explain to her, I say, look, in our culture, people don't chew with their mouth open. There's nothing wrong with, really with chewing with your mouth open, other than it's just we don't really prefer that anymore. So, and I'll explain to her, I'm like, look, most people, if you do chew with your mouth open, are going to be uncomfortable and they're not going to like it. And I'm like, think about when the things you prefer and when people don't respect your preferences. And I try to, with manners, that's kind of how I talk to her about manners. And I don't make her follow good manners, but I just explain to her that this is, maybe it's my preference that you not do that. I always, and going hand in hand with that, when she expresses her preferences, in order for that to work, I have to respect her preferences. So that's kind of, that's how I handle things like manners and getting along well and getting towards that picture that Stefan was talking about how you want your family to look and what makes you feel good. If you have if you're very open with your child and are very respecting of each other's preferences and have great communication, and you don't abuse your authority, and don't allow your child to abuse their authority as well. A lot of parents let their children shove them around, quote unquote shove them around. They throw a fit and then the parent gives in. That's actually the child abusing their authority. So you don't want that authority to be the basis of your relationship, of how you resolve conflicts, who's going to flex their muscle and win this battle. You don't want it to be win-lose scenarios. So It's
Well, sorry, I just would mention this because the tantrum thing comes up quite a bit, and my daughter's not had a tantrum, and certainly not so far, and she's almost 4, so I don't think it's about to start. I mean, I think when you say that children are abusing their authority, I think it's always really, really tough. It's very much a last resort for me to go towards the moral judgment of the children because they are so much learning their environment. If the kid's been home with a parent till they're 5 and they don't know any of their letters, you don't call the kid dumb. You call the kid not exposed to letters, right? And so
sure.
I think a tantrum occurs when the child wants something and can't find a way to communicate it in a win-win environment. Now, to me, the only way to really educate my daughter is to relentlessly and consistently display the behavior that I want, explain the reasons for it, and never enforce it.
Right.
That's sort of magic trio.
Yeah, clearly when a child throws a tantrum to get their way, they learn that somewhere. And who they learn that from? I mean, 95% or more of what they've learned, they learn from their parents. So, it's if your child's doing something you don't like, you probably need to look in the mirror and think about it for a bit. And usually you figure out where they learned it. So if you teach your child,
a lot of parenting is I'm bigger, stronger, and have more power, and therefore you're going to do this. And that, of course, is I think a very unsettling lesson to teach to the child. It's not an appeal to ethics or universality or virtue or, let us both conform to this, objective standard. It is, well, I'm bigger and you're just going to do this. And that, of course, to me is the root of tantrums because that is a parental tantrum. It's just a more controlled version. It's like slow burn rather than a quick burn. And of course, the problem is that really boomerangs in the teenage years because now the kid has independence, authority relative to the parent. And if you've inculcated them, in a sense, the might is right argument, I think it really boomerangs back. And this is why so many teenagers have so many conflicts, I think, with their parents, because they're really reflecting that lesson back at a time where they now have that kind of power and authority.
Yeah, and this we could take this in this direction too, because I like this because, we are shaping these very liberty-minded children in our homes. They have the ability to choose, they have choice, and we're trying to do this in the very best possible way, teach them to be philosophical and to have the ability to make their own choices at a very young age. So then they go out into the world around them. And fortunately for myself, I know for Chris, we don't have our kids in public school systems, but a lot of kids don't have that choice, and they go in there and they live in a world where there is a hierarchy, where there is the belief that might is right or it wins out. One time you mentioned that it's like the 12-year sentence, and that public school was like a Lord of the Flies. I heard that one time in the Parenting Unplugged or Unplugged Parenting. I heard you mention that, and it kind of stuck with me because I remembered the Lord of the Flies high school situations for myself. Is that might does win over that. So then we got these very liberty-minded children. But, where else and what other time period were there 3 dads across the globe getting together to talk about parenting? I mean, this is highly unusual, but it's progress. So anyway, with that being said, thank you for being a guest on 2 Beers with Steve, Stefan.